Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to be exploring mentoring specifically within the financial services industries, really focusing on what you can do to build future-ready teams in 2024. My name's Jess from Mentorloop. Mentorloop is a mentoring software provider, and we support organizations all over the world to build and execute really exceptional mentoring programs. Today's agenda, we're going to start off by looking at some of the challenges that are facing the financial industry before moving on to looking at the power of formalized mentoring. We're going to jump into the Mentorloop tool and take a look at just how simple it is to build a mentoring program, and also touch on how to measure your program. We'll look at a real life mentoring program. We'll look at a case study from NIB. And then we'll open up for any questions at the end. Now, do feel free to put any questions in the chat as we go along. I've already had a few emailed over to me, and we'll go ahead and pick those up in the end. So if we jump into it here, when we look at the financial services industry as a whole, 2024 is shaping up to be a really interesting year. And I'm sure this is all stuff that is not going to come as a major shock or a major surprise to you. But generally, what we're seeing is this slowing global economy and fluctuating interest rates, which is testing institutions' ability to generate income. And with this reduction in demand, it's more important than ever that we're in a position where we're upskilling and providing the tools to the people who are on the front line, especially that revenue generating team. Alongside this, we're seeing this rapid growth of tech, specifically within the financial sector. Now, of course, this is changing the way that your people work. It's changing the way that your customers interact with your organization. And at the same time, we've got this more assertive regulatory system. So when we combine those two pieces, it's really important for HR teams to be on the lookout for potential skills gaps within the organization. Now, the next piece I've got here is not necessarily finance specific, and it's something that, again, it's not a sort of a 2024 thing either. Last year in the US, nearly 70% of companies reported that they were struggling to attract great talent. This is up from 14% a decade ago. So, it's something that we've seen happening slowly over quite a large space of time, but it's being felt really keenly within the financial services sector right now. There's a lot of reasons why it's felt more keenly for yourselves. Some of this is about the sheer volume of institutions that there are. There's lots of different sizes, there's lots of different competition there. But of course, retaining your top talent is going to be significantly cheaper than going to market, especially in the current talent marketplace. And then the final piece here is around that focus on diversity and inclusion. And it's something that has been a theme again for a little while now. Rightly so. Organizations with a more diverse leadership team do enjoy, on average, 33% higher profitability than organizations that have a more homogenous leadership team. Now, when we look at all of these other factors that are at play, to be able to best serve your customers and your organization as a whole, there will need to be a real focus on this diversity piece and diversifying your workforce. So in light of all of that, everything that's going on, all of these challenges, what we are seeing is a significant percentage of banking, insurance, and the sort of broader financial services organizations are turning towards mentoring. And why is that? Now, look, we could spend probably half an hour here talking about all of the benefits of mentoring. They are numerous, they are multifaceted. But why specifically within the financial services industry, given those challenges that we've just discussed, are formal mentoring programs so important? Now, to start off, a mentoring program tends to be more accessible than other training initiatives that you might run. And the more people that you've got engaged in these sorts of initiatives, naturally, the better that's going to be for the whole organization, especially in times of change and in challenge. When we look at organizations that have really good retention, it tends to come down to engagement, right? Individuals in your organization who are participating in a mentoring program are consistently more engaged with their role, but also within that business. And that does have, as you can imagine, that direct impact on retention. And actually looking at retention further, individuals in a mentoring program are retained at a 20% higher rate on average for mentors, slightly higher for mentees at 22%. So, when you look across your whole organization, if you can increase that retention rate by between 20 and 22%, that's going to be a real game changer, frankly. Now, of course, mentoring is always going to be a powerful tool in any learning and development team's arsenal. The reason for that is that, of course, different from other training initiatives, mentoring benefits both parties in the agreement. The other thing that it gives you is more of this focus on soft skills development. Now, there's going to be skills gaps that are identified. They might be around tech, they might be around regulation, but there's also going to be some key soft skills that are going to help your people weather this time. These are things like resilience, resourcefulness, grit, communication skills. And your mentees are in a real position to work on these soft skills within a mentoring environment. Now, of course, your mentors don't lose out in this deal. Your mentors are have an opportunity to work on things like leadership, an opportunity to reinforce good behavior. So it's a real powerful one to benefit more than just the trainees, if you like. Now, the fourth point I've got here is really around measurability. Now, you may find that you already have organic mentoring relationships taking place within your organization. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But by formalizing a mentoring program, you're in a position to measure how effective this is being for your people. Now, why is this important right now? Measuring what you do is always going to be important, right? But why have I included it? In a time where your traditional income streams are being constricted, are being challenged, things like learning and development initiatives are going to be questioned more than they perhaps have done in the past. And being able to provide that measurability, that impact into how this is helping your people is going to be the difference between something that fizzles out or gets struck off the budget and something that is embedded and is sustainable. And that brings me on to my final point here. Why are we seeing this increase specifically within the financial sector? Mentoring is incredibly cost effective. When we look at that cost per participant, it's often, in fact, we did some research into it recently, it's around 800 times cheaper to run a mentoring program than it is to have people going to executive coaching. And that's predominantly down to that accessibility piece as well. Now, this all sounds great, right? We want to run a mentoring program, but you will have heard that starting a formal mentoring program is really difficult and tracking it is in fact even harder. So how do you start? Now, look, at Mentorloop, we support with that end-to-end facilitation of mentoring programs. But for today, I really want to show you just how easy it is to get set up specifically with Mentorloop Pro, which is our self-serve off-the-shelf software. Comes in at a really low price point. So again, looking at that cost effectiveness, this is a great place to start. And I'm going to jump into this here. Now I've logged into the Mentorloop Pro Program Builder. I am going to follow up today's webinar with the link to Program Builder. So you can go in, have a bit of a play for yourself, see what you can customize out for your specific needs. Now, the Program Builder is building your mentoring program in just 3 steps. And we start with some basics of the program. In 1 second, my internet typically has seemed to have a moment. So we start off with some basics of the program. Things like number of participants, launch date, the aims of your program, and an opportunity to tell us a bit more. The second step is centered around your matching style. Now, look, in my role, I talk with organizations all over the world. And when we think about mentoring, one of those core elements, that solid foundation from which your mentoring program grows, is this matching. And I get a lot of questions around how do we match our people? Now, with our pro software, we have two core matching methodologies and a sort of hybrid approach as well that's sort of in there for giving you a little bit more, a few more options. Now, with the manual match, this is where the program coordinator does the matching. And a manual match program is great for programs that have more of a specific aim. So if you're doing a women in leadership or a diversity program, high potentials or succession planning program, manual match is a great place for that. The second style is self-match. So in this case, we create a tool that allows your people to self-organize into their connections. And in my experience, these are really well suited to programs that are centered around fostering a sense of connection, networking perhaps. And then, of course, a blended approach is a bit of both. Move this bar back down. Now, the third stage is looking at your program's theme. When we look at these themes, this really starts to form out some of the questions that you might ask your people. Now, the vast majority of you that are joining us today would be looking at Mentorloop Classic. This is your classic mentoring program, normally internal to companies. If you're looking at running a program that centers around diversity, we've just seen the power that diversity can have for your workforce, then the DEI theme is a great place to start. And I did notice that today we do have some people joining us who come from finance-focused industry associations. And for you folks, community is the best place to start. I'm going to select Mentorloop Classic. And this then builds out my registration form. And the registration form is the entry point for how your participants get into your program. We pre-fill these questions for you. So again, really making this as simple as possible, working on best practice and knowledge that we have. We start with questions like, which role best describes you? You'll notice we've got the ability to make some changes here. Maybe your program includes eithers, so people who can perform both roles. Maybe it doesn't. We'll move on to looking at goals and skills. And we can add new skills within here and remove any that don't make sense. And from here, we can either include or remove any question or make it mandatory or optional. As we continue to configure this form, there are some more questions where you can choose if you want to include them, as well as some that will require a little bit more customization. So things like department, if I add a few in here, as well as location. So if we want to add some locations that make sense, they could be regions, they could be offices, they could even be remote workers. And once this sign-up form is complete, the very final stage here is to customize your program. You can come in here, change the name, add your program colors, so your company colors as well as your logo. And when we save that, what we should see is all three boxes are in green. Well, you'll notice I didn't select the matching style, so I'm going to go back and select that. And this is going to give us the ability to launch our program. There we go, 3 green boxes. And we're now in a position to launch our program, or of course, book in a program review with the team, and we'll make sure that everything's looking perfect and ready to launch. So as you can see, we've done that together in a couple of minutes. There is no more need to be strategizing, living in spreadsheets, building these out in a manual fashion. Mentorloop Pro does all that work for you. And I promised I'd show you a little bit more around reporting. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the reporting in Mentorloop today. If you're interested in learning more, do book in and myself or the team can take you through some of those reporting metrics that we can pull for you. But on this homepage, we've got some of the key metrics of your program. So your health metrics, participants, matching. We can see how participants are tracking through the milestones journey. And this is something that we use to help keep your participants engaged. And we can also see the sentiment of the program here. And this is generated through a series of automatic pulse surveys that trigger at key events in the mentoring timeline. Things like 30 days post-match, after every meeting, and at the end of mentoring relationships. We can deep dive through the managed program in the left-hand navigation bar. So maybe you want to see more about the registrations to your program or the participants on your program. Perhaps we want to evaluate the mentoring pairs. You might want to take a deep dive into the sentiment, so the responses to those pulse surveys, or take a look at the goals that are being set or achieved for your people. And when you're ready, you can click and it will all generate into a nice, lovely, easy to share report. So when people are asking, how's that mentoring program going? You don't have to go into your spreadsheets, work out what's going on. It's one button and very easy to send over. As I say, not an exhaustive sort of demo of Mentorloop today, really just giving you a little bit of a highlights reel of what you could expect to be able to measure utilizing Mentorloop. I'm going to jump back over here. Now, I always find that looking at real programs is a great place for inspiration. So today I'm going to show you a little bit more about NIB. Now, NIB are a health insurance provider. We've been working with them for about 2 years now. And the goal that they had was around connecting their hybrid workforce of course, in a post-pandemic world. This is a theme that we have seen. The program's gone really well. They have had it as an always on, and always on is where the program is available to join at any time. So it's great if you've got new hires or interns that are coming in. And they made it available to all. Now, of course, with that accessibility, they've seen really, really good impact. They know that because using Mentorloop, they've been able to look at participant satisfaction, sits at 91%, as well as evaluate the quality of their program using the Mentorloop quality score. They actually won an impact award as well. So I'm going to include this case study in my follow-up. So do go through, have a look. It's always good to get some ideas from people who've done it really well. Now, before we close out for questions here, if this has sparked an interest to get a mentoring program up and running, or potentially to formalize anything organic that you already have, here's a couple of next steps for you. Now, when you're looking at building your program, the first thing you'll want to do is define that objective. As we saw for NIB, that was connecting their remote workforce, their hybrid workforce. Step 2 is building your business case. We have some really handy tools that help build this business case. Who are we looking at? What's the impact going to be? That sort of thing. The third step will be to consider training. How are we going to make sure that the people in our organization who participate on this program understand the role of a mentee and mentor and the whole art and science of the mentoring process? And then the fourth step, once you've done all of these, is to recruit your participants. Now, as I've already made very clear, the programs that we see the most impactful are ones that invite everybody to join. When you're recruiting your participants here, there's loads of different things that you can do. If you've got an all hands, if you've got sort of special events coming up, for example, we've got International Women's Day in just a couple of weeks. So if you want to get that female participation, anchoring into some of these key events does help with that recruitment process. And of course, you can book a demo with myself and my team. We will help you do all of these things so you don't have to. And of course, talk about how software can support with your program. Now I'm going to stop sharing and open up for any questions. Do feel free to pop them in the questions here, but I did have some come through over email before we started. I've got these written down. So a question that I had come over was from, I won't tell you who it's from, but they have asked, we have ran programs in the past, but struggled to keep them going. What would you suggest? Now, there's no easy answer to that one because the reason why your program did fizzle out is going to be for a multitude of reasons. Now, ones that I see most frequently are lack of ownership. Nobody owned the program. It took too long to administer. And these two sort of go hand in hand, right? If it's going to be a manual program where you are going to be taking a lot of hours to administer that program, it needs to be in someone's job description. Other things that I've seen is lack of understanding for your participants around what the aims of the program are and what they should be doing. We support with that, and I haven't gone into the Mentorloop participant experience at all today. Again, do book in. We can have a chat about that at any time that suits you. But we also support with that engagement and that understanding piece through our milestones journey and inbuilt training. Great question. So the next question I have is, in your experience, how long should a mentoring program last? I probably get that question every day. So it's a really good one. And again, unfortunately, there's no easy answer to that. There are loosely two types of mentoring programs that we see. The first of which is like NIB, which is an always-on program. So these programs allow people to join at any time. Naturally, you'll have people phasing out, but the mentoring relationships tend to last around 9 months. Doesn't really matter in an always-on program because we tend to find people pick their own party. The other program type that we see is a cohorted program. So these are start on a definitive date and run for a definitive amount of time. And these programs tend to be really specific aims. So women in leadership is another great example of that. They could be a proof of concept. And again, in that case, I would suggest that the mentoring element is around 9 to 10 months long. Now, of course, you'll need a month to get started and a month to evaluate before you kick off with the next cohort. So you do tend to, sort of always have mentoring on the agenda, but the program itself is around that 9 to 10 months. Final two questions that I have here. If you do have any more, do feel free to pop them in the Q&A. I've got a question, is Mentorloop an app? If you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, I'd have said no, but you may have seen emails from us recently. We did recently launch our mobile app. It's going to be really handy for that participant engagement, things like push notifications. Let's be honest, we all live on our phones, don't we? So take mentoring to the people. And then the final question I've got here is, I'm interested to know more about costs. Now, I want to be really transparent about costings. Today, I've shown you the Mentorloop Pro Program Builder, which has been designed to be really budget friendly. Starts off at $299 US per month for up to 50 participants. That's not per participant, that's for up to 50, and then scales from there. We do have two other versions of Mentorloop that scale up in terms of service, customization, and tech support, and they do come with a representative price tag. So if you're interested in learning more, do book in. Love to chat to you about what's going to be the best solution for you. Have I got any more questions? I've got no more questions for today. So we will close out there. Thanks so much for joining. It's been great to have you here today. As I say, any other questions, anything else that you need from Mentorloop or just to chat about mentoring within the financial services trade in general, do reach out. There'll be a link in the follow-up email. And yeah, hopefully I'll be talking to you soon.